And that's the exciting thing, is this is a society thing, and let's do it for the benefit of us all.
Worth a career stab, eh? Give it a go.
Yeah, why not? I mean, like you said, we've got 1,000 days.
Let's actually focus on the impact first.
Episode 84 with Louise Aitken and Minister Henare on collaborating to support social enterprise development from Aotearoa, New Zealand, published 15th of August 2018. Talks with innovators, creatives and enterprises, captures and shares stories, learns and journeys to now of people making positive dents on society. I'm your host, David Binstead. Less than a month away from Social Enterprise World Forum 2018, I'm fortunate to be chatting again with Louise Aitken, Chief Executive of Arkina Foundation, fanatical Arsenal supporter and quite literally the ultimate optimist. I'm also stoked to be joined by Peeni Henare, Labour MP for the Tamaki Makaurau electorate, Minister for the Community and Voluntary Sector, also Minister for Whanau Ora and Minister for Youth, as well as Associate Minister for Social Development. How do you find time? Husband to Maya and proud parents of 5 tamariki, or children, and let's not forget, huge Philadelphia Eagles fan. Welcome both of you to the Podcave.
Yeah, kia ora.
Over the last 3 years, I've been independently reporting on social enterprise development from New Zealand, chatting with the doers and facilitators building a movement. Let's dive straight in. Lou, where is Aotearoa, New Zealand at with social enterprise?
Social enterprise in New Zealand, I think the term social enterprise is new. Social enterprise is part of our history. It's part of who we've been as a culture since trading started, 180 years ago, even more. And, what we want to be able to do as a sector here in New Zealand is be able to honour that and to be able to celebrate it and really understand the uniqueness of social enterprise in our country and how we fit globally. We're probably a little bit of a toddler, maybe 2 to 3, and really starting to understand where we fit and what we can offer, which is really exciting.
And Minister Henare, how often do you get to hang out with Lou?
Pretty frequently over the past 10 months, which has been an eye-opener for me too, because Lou's right, it's not new here, but how we approach it and the things that we can do in this space for Aotearoa, New Zealand, while we've got a rich heritage, and that's a great way to describe it. We are in new territory in some respects, and if I can put on my big boy undies and talk a little bit about work for government, this is a new space. This really is. While it's not new to other countries, our government here are still trying to grapple with what social enterprise looks like. We understand the concept, but how does this look when we consider we spend taxpayer dollar, or how does this look when we create policy or legislation? Are we able to enhance it, create an environment for it? And that's why my interactions with Lou and others across the country actually have been really, really insightful. And so Lou's right, we are in, I'd say toddler years, but man, it's so exciting, it really is.
Was it teething 2s, terrible 3s? Is that about it?
Oh, I think I probably can recall my son at 2 and having a voice, being able to understand you are a person and you have a place. That's the maturity I think we're starting to see in the social enterprise space, that we know as a sector what we can deliver and the opportunities. And now with the support of government and the support of a more connected sector, our voice is getting stronger. We understand more about what we need, and we can start to talk about the value that we bring back to communities and society as a whole. And I think that's really exciting, particularly with these big challenges that we need to face as Aotearoa, whether it's in the social space, inequality, child poverty, or whether it's as a response to the big things that are coming, that are already here through climate change, but the opportunities that exist in that space through innovation. And that's exciting, a toddler with voice, which is pretty cool to think.
Definitely. Minister, I appreciate that with that long portfolio of ministerial responsibilities, your time is both extremely valuable, but also you're spread pretty thinly. How much time are you able to give social enterprise?
What I enjoy about social enterprise is that it is like nurturing and growing a child or whatever it might be. You get to put time, and the more time you put into it, the better it'll be, right? See, if the government stops its focus on social enterprise, I think the government will be poorer for it. The social enterprise sector will still continue through struggles and through good times, but if we stop it, then I don't think that's a good thing. So therefore, quite a bit more time has been put into social enterprise without meddling. We need to let this sector explore itself and grow and do it by hands off, but with a clear eye on what's going on, and which is why the partnership with Ākina is crucial. So in terms of effort and time and energy, I'd say a lot, but definitely from a distance for now. We want to be a mirror with tāmoko, with a great environment. That's what we want to be.
The fact that when we last spoke, way back, episode 62, you were sitting on a secret, which was that you knew you were going to be appointed chief executive imminently. And obviously we didn't at that stage.
There was another big secret that after that evening. That was the night that Winston decided to make you a partner, which was very exciting. And we were all here together, actually, and thinking about what that meant for us as a sector going through to a partnership with a new government, and particularly a government of coalition partners. And, thinking back now, 10 months later, how exciting that is for us.
And you've got the Minister on speed dial now.
We meet more regularly on the plane or in the Koru Lounge.
We do, which says a lot about, the work that we do.
That's right, yeah.
So just even looking back from that point, just about a year ago, what challenges do you think that social entrepreneurs in New Zealand face these days?
One of the big things that we're doing at the moment, and really the first activity around the partnership with Minister Henare and the Department of Internal Affairs, is how are we learning what those issues are? How are we engaging across the sector to pull together people to share their stories, to share their challenges, to share the opportunities that they see in the work that they do. And then how do we understand how to respond to that? So we're doing a lot of kitchen table talks at the moment, going right around New Zealand and asking those questions through our partnership. The external facing of that is the Impact Initiative, is starting to ask those questions, and we're certainly seeing a very consistent message. One's around access to capital. As any entrepreneur, that's a huge issue, and it's not necessarily access just to capital, it's access to the right capital, coming from the right place with the right capability to support that. So that's something we're going to be working hard about. One of the things that we often struggle with, and this is a newly formed sector as such, with a newly formed term, what is the definition of social enterprise? What do we want it to be? What do we need it to be? What's the support structures that have to come as a result of that, whether it's big policy shifts or opportunities in the regulation space? Those are things that we need to work through as a sector, and it's not easy answers either. And so we've got to make sure that we're understanding all the different needs and figuring out together collectively with partnership with government how to respond to that. And so I definitely say those are the two big challenges at the moment, is access to capital and actually defining what social enterprise is in an Aotearoa context.
Minister?
Yeah, look, that's exactly right. And, the challenge for the government is actually to listen. If you talk to social entrepreneurs and even just modern day entrepreneurs, there's an optimism there. And the government, for its traditional frameworks, are still trying to understand, well, what is this? How do we support it? We don't want to create legislation for legislation's sake. We want a framework that'll grow, develop and support it and nurture it, as opposed to restricting it, which is what I've always been scared of. And you talked about swearing earlier. And I'll just share a very brief story. I went to Wairoa recently up on the East Coast, and I met with the Deputy Mayor, and she was awesome. They gave a ministerial welcome, and she said, "Minister, welcome to Wairoa, and don't effing tell us what to do." And I just went, oh, I'm with you, I hear you. Because when government steps in too often, it's not always about taking the best idea and scaling it up. Sometimes it's about allowing that individuality to grow for itself. Our challenge is to listen, to let that partnership and let that future and that brand grow for itself, and just keep an observation and observing eye over how things will go. And so how do we incentivize? That's government's challenge, is to support the sector that way.
So in terms of where you do see social enterprise going, what do you see as the opportunities, Lou?
The biggest opportunity that we see with social enterprise is the valuation of impact. How can a society, how can a community, how can a government, whether that's central or local government, how can they, as a corporate or a philanthropic organisation, understand and value the impact that can be achieved through trade, through communities coming together and helping to solve some of the social and the environmental issues that they face. And I think if we are able to do that, we answer those big questions that are happening outside of social enterprise around consumers wanting to understand where they're buying things from and the values that come from the organisations who make the goods or services, from employees who are starting to question, who am I employed by? What are they doing to solve some of the things that I really care about? And particularly coming back to Minister Henare's comment is around the investors. Investors now are understanding that they can get more than just a financial return, and many of them are actually demanding it. So that's changing the landscape. It's changing the questions that people are asking at all of those different levels. And in the heart of all of that is how we're delivering impact to actually solve and answer some of those questions. And, I've always said social enterprise is not the answer to everything. Social enterprise can provide some of the solutions, but that needs traditional business, it needs the charity sector, it needs government, and it needs citizens to actually understand the role that they can play. And when you have something like procurement, where it's central, local government, traditional business procurement, you suddenly have dollars which are much, much bigger than just the government's budget. New Zealand businesses last year spent $561 billion in expenditure. That's a lot of impact if that's directed to organisations who can supply a good or a service with impact on top. And so that's the type of opportunity that I see for the social enterprise sector here in New Zealand.
So, Minister, what about the Indigenous approach to social enterprise or to enterprising? What are your perspectives there?
Louise hit on it at the beginning about our heritage in this country. I don't want to call it a unique Māori approach. I actually see, while we're a relatively young country, the fact that Louise talked about kaitiakitanga, that's not while it's a Māori word and perhaps a Māori concept at one point in time, I like to think it's a New Zealand concept now. That's what makes the indigeneity of this country. We buy into a set of values, and that's the indigeneity we're talking about. To your question, that sort of Māori or the indigeneity, the indigenous lens on social enterprise is something that's already there. It really is. How we manaaki, how we care for people, how we, as kaitiaki, how we care for the environment. Our job now is to actually capture that, because I believe it's happening. Growing up in a Māori community or even small town New Zealand, where there's Māori, Pākehā, everyone's there. I think it's already happening. We've got to get better at capturing it, identifying it, nurturing it where we need to, squashing it in other places because it's not always the perfect model or whatever it might be. So that's the Aotearoa New Zealand brand, in my opinion. It's not just a Māori thing, but of course, being a Māori, I'm sort of one-eyed about some things, and I do see it as a platform for opportunity in other respects. And there was a mention about trade and business, because I wear a traditional tāmoko on my body from my knee to my lower back, and I stepped out in a piu-piu and all of the Asian markets saw how I was dressed and the product we had and identified with it straight away. So culture broke down that barrier. So yeah, I think there's things to be learned on both sides, whether Māori, Pākehā, but let's be very clear, and that's the point we talk about, which we will soon, about the World Forum. It's an Aotearoa New Zealand brand, and we've got to present a united brand, in my opinion, to really stamp our mark on the world.
Is there anything, Minister, that you think is specific to Maori social enterprise that is either different or unique in terms of either delivery or support?
I think when we consider it from a deficit view of identifying a social problem first, I think you get a different perspective and a different model of operation, simply because we all know the statistics. Māoris are overrepresented in the lower socioeconomic factors and indicators. So we look at it from a different perspective naturally. So when I met with Janice at Koha Kai down in Invercargill, she's not a businessman nor an entrepreneur. Yet she's got probably one of the greatest models I've seen of social enterprise, because she identified a social problem. And it was at her school where her kids were going, which was predominantly Māori, kids were starving. So feed them. Simple. That's not a Māori thing, that's a parent thing. That's a person, a human thing. But she saw it in her community. And I think that's where the different, and I know that sounds like a deficit view of it, but if I was to pick the difference, I'd say that's where the drive and the model is grown from. That's where its organic growth comes from, which is different to thinking about enterprise as your platform for launching or growing this particular kaupapa.
We then dove into social enterprise access to capital. Some quick background. Chris Simcock is an EHF, or Edmund Hillary Fellowship Cohort 2 Fellow, and lead for the recently launched $10 million Impact Enterprise Fund. There's been some criticism of the fund that their criteria for investment returns are too strict. I asked Lou if she had any thoughts on how that funding model is starting out and also how it may evolve.
So first I have to say I'm on the board of that fund. That fund was set up for a very unique purpose. It was set up to be able to start the conversation around impact investment in New Zealand, to be able to understand how we might deliver a fund that could start the wall of money coming. We knew that education was going to be a significant aspect to that, and we knew that we needed to be able to prove that we could not only raise the capital required to start a relatively small fund, but that we would have to also really focus on the development of the opportunities on the investee side, so the organisations that will invest. We had to make a decision as to which end of the spectrum the fund would be focused on. The needs of capital from a social entrepreneur or impact investment standpoint are significant. They are from what's currently existing at the moment, 100% loss, right through to low interest loans, right through to a fund like ours with a 15% financial return. So a $10 million fund focused at that high end we knew had to be the starting point. We needed to go in with a market return. So yes, absolutely, it is a finance first fund, and we don't hide behind that. We know, therefore, that the organisations that could be investable are going to be very small, because they need to be those funds that are, or those organisations that have a significant opportunity for a financial return. And there's not many of them, because the sector's growing and maturing. And hopefully within the next month we're going to do our first investment. Is it the only type of fund that the sector needs? Absolutely not. But it is a starting point. It's only $10 million, and it's only going to be relevant for a very small amount of social enterprises or impact-driven organisations. You need to start somewhere.
From needing to start somewhere and looking overseas for impact capital successes, Lou brought things back to Aotearoa with the novel idea that homegrown pension funds could and should support local community enterprises.
we look at what's happened in other countries, right? So, in the UK, it started with Big Society Capital, which is from, the dormant bank accounts. In Australia, there is, a significant impact investment sector, and with a large amount of capital, and a lot of that capital actually coming from the pension funds. So, what's the opportunity in New Zealand? Well, why don't we give the opportunity for a KiwiSaver to actually say, I want to invest in something that I care deeply about. The good thing is we're having those conversations now across the sector, and with the support of Minister Henare, we've been able to launch the Impact Investment Network and the National Advisory Board for impact investment in Aotearoa, and we will be ratified to the Global Steering Group in October. Just heard that the Prime Minister has been invited to speak, and Al Gore actually was announced yesterday as one of the keynote speakers for that. So maybe baby Neve is going to have a cuddle with Uncle Al in the future. But that's the great thing about where we are. We are ready and primed to have the conversation, and hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years there will be the ability for any investor to actually make a contribution to the society in which they want to live in and pass on to their children. And that's pretty exciting.
The analogy in my head is the serene swan just drifting effortlessly across the lake, but paddling furiously underneath, like completely furiously, in terms of Akina collaborating with government to be putting the building blocks together that can help support the growth of the movement.
And now's the time to do it. You got to start somewhere, and I'm really heartened by the discussions of my colleagues across not just social enterprise but social well-being, changing the frameworks and the systems that have run our country and our communities, and even at a micro level, us as individuals. They've all got to change. A living standards framework from Treasury. Wow. One that doesn't simply measure dollar input and what's the actual fiscal outcome at the other end, but saying, hey, our community's better off, our family's better off, our environment's better off, or whatever it might be. Being smarter about procurement, being smarter about investment, I think is the way we've got to go. So we're having generational and transformational change discussions amongst my colleagues, and that's exciting.
Worth a career stab, eh? Give it a go.
Yeah, well, why not? I mean,